The federal government is announcing measures to stabilize grocery prices. Let's listen.
Allows Canadians to contribute up to $40,000 towards the purchase of their first home. That money is tax-free going in, and it's tax-free when it is withdrawn to contribute to that first down payment. Since we introduced the tax-free first home savings account in April, it has already started to be offered by most of Canada's major financial institutions. And I have an announcement about it today. I'm thrilled to announce that more than 150,000 Canadians have already opened their tax-free first home savings account. And many more accounts are being opened every day. This is really phenomenal take-up. It shows that hundreds of thousands of Canadians believe that they can buy their first home, and they're saving to do just that. We also know that there is a shortage of homes for these 150,000 Canadians putting money away in a first home savings account, and for those who continue to open accounts. And that's why we are aggressively rolling out agreements with municipalities using the $400 billion National Housing Accelerator Fund, which was announced in Budget 2022. We already have deals with London, and as you know, the Prime Minister announced a deal in Vaughan today that Sean has been working so hard on. These agreements are supporting municipalities that are committed to changing their zoning rules so we can get more homes built faster. That's what Canada needs to do, and that is what our Housing Accelerator Fund is doing. We also know that rental apartments are essential in a Canada where everyone has a great place to call home. And we know we also need to build more rental units faster. That's why last week we announced that we were unlocking an additional $20 billion in new financing to build up to 30,000 additional rental units per year. And last month, I introduced the Affordable Housing and Groceries Act, our government's first piece of legislation this fall, which will remove the GST on the construction of new apartment buildings so we can get more rental units built faster. La semaine dernière, j'ai annoncé que nous...
Last week, I announced that we were making available $20 million in new funding to build up to 30,000 new units, rental units per year. Last month, I introduced the Affordable Housing and Groceries Act. That is our government's first bill this fall. It will eliminate the GST on the construction of new rental units so that more units for rental are built quicker.
To get this legislation passed as quickly as possible so that more shovels can get in the ground. Today, Bill C-56 is being debated for the 5th time. I'd like to call today on the Conservative leader to end the procedural delays, allow us to get this legislation passed. Canadians need more homes to be built faster. This legislation will do that. This legislation also introduces important changes to the Competition Act, which will help in the work of stabilizing prices. There's really no excuse for delaying this legislation, and I hope all parties will join us in passing it. Today, we'll also be launching consultations on a further lowering of the criminal rate of interest. We cracked down on predatory lending in our spring budget by lowering the criminal rate of interest from 47% to 35%. Today, we're going further. This is about making sure that predatory lenders can't trap the most vulnerable Canadians in a spiral of debt. And today, my colleague, Francois-Philippe, will be announcing next steps to stabilize grocery prices for Canadians, as we promised we would do. Notre gouvernement se concentre à obtenir...
Our government is focused on delivering results for Canadians. Today's announcements are more examples of our action plan.
Excellent. Merci, Christia. Merci tout le monde.
Thank you, Christia, and thank you, everyone.
Start by saying over the last number of weeks, you'll have seen a number of measures that we've rolled out to help address the national housing crisis that we're living through. If we're going to solve the national housing crisis, we need to tackle the very specific problems that underlie it. One of those challenges is really focused on the way that cities build homes, or in some instances don't build homes. There's too many communities across the country that actually make it illegal to build the kinds of homes that are going to help us get where we need to be. In particular, the need to build more densely, not just near transit stations, but across communities. Today, we've got very good news. The Prime Minister announced earlier a $59 million contribution to the City of Vaughan to the Housing Accelerator Fund. The way that we got here was through working closely with Mayor Del Duca and with the Council to identify areas where they wanted to take a leadership role, and some areas where we may have been able to encourage them to go even further. The kinds of things that they're actually doing to take advantage of the fund include building out a tremendous number of high-rise density, high-dense buildings within walking distance to transit, including the GO train and subway stations. They're working very hard to streamline the permitting process to issue permits more quickly, and are implementing all 27 recommendations from the city's 2022 Development Transportation Support report that they had commissioned. They're allowing more missing middle, so to speak, medium density buildings with more family size units, and they're actually going to adopt a new rule through conversations with our office that's going to legalize 4 units as of right everywhere across the city. What's remarkable is the city has indicated they believe that these measures and others that I haven't necessarily covered in detail today is going to unlock up to 44,000 new homes in the city alone. That's over the next 10 years. The Housing Accelerator Fund had an estimated impact when we designed it over the next 3 years or so to unlock 100,000 new homes. It is proving to be more successful than I thought possible even just a few weeks ago when we made the first announcement in the City of London. With a national goal over the next 3 years of 100,000, and seeing the City of Vaughan step out and say they can do more than 40,000 gives me faith that this is going to have a very, very meaningful impact. I should say as well that I do not believe the job is done, but I have a sense of optimism that I didn't have a few months ago. And I have a sense of optimism because the measures that we put forward are starting to show very real promise, not fictional numbers that are dreamed up in a boardroom in Ottawa, but that are being validated by people on the ground. The Housing Accelerator Fund is a great example, and Vaughan is not the only city we've worked with. You'll have seen the work that we've done with the City of London, the City of Calgary. We're working very closely with Halifax and Edmonton and Brampton. And now with the work that's led to the announcement today in Vaughan, we're seeing ambitious cities step up with extraordinary growth plans that they did not have on the books before the Housing Accelerator Fund was actually rolling announcements out. But we know that the Housing Accelerator Fund is not a complete answer to the crisis that we're living through, but we're starting to see the other measures we've advanced take hold as well. After the introduction of the GST measure that we're removing federal taxation on the construction of new apartments, we saw provinces step up. But we saw developers announce projects. Dream Corporation announced 5,000 rentals in Ottawa, Saskatoon, Toronto. We've seen Fitzrovia Real Estate announce 3,000 new units that were going to remain on the shelf. We've seen Tricon Residential announce 1,000 units. We've seen in communities across the country announce that projects that were not going ahead are now going to go ahead. We see the First Home Saving Account have incredible uptake with 150,000 people now signing up. And we see measures like the Canada Mortgage Bond demonstrate through the conversations I've had with players in the sector, indicate that they expect a full uptake of the additional capitalization that we've made available, which will validate the estimate of 30,000 units every year that this measure remains in place. We have a long way to go, but the measures we're introducing are starting to have a very real impact. And today's announcement in Vaughan is a great example of how we can use federal leadership and federal funding to drive change in cities across the country. I'm happy to pass the floor over to my colleague, Francois-Philippe.
Well, that's very impressive. Bonjour tout le monde. Good afternoon, everyone. Every day is a good day to fight for Canadians, and today is no different. Canadians are rightfully frustrated with the increase of the price of living. And we've been talking about that for weeks now, especially when it comes to food. We are in solution mode to bring relief to Canadians, and you've seen a number of actions that we've been taking over the last few weeks. Afin de trouver des solutions, j'ai récemment...
In order to find solutions, I recently met with some of the key players in the grocery industry. I met with the 5 heads of the major groceries and supermarkets. I met with them here in Ottawa. At that meeting, we all agreed that we needed to work together as a team in order to support Canadians through these difficult times. And at these meetings, I expressed to them the frustration that millions of Canadians are feeling. They're feeling this frustration given the current situation. I spoke strongly and passionately on behalf of Canadians, and they heard me, they listened. And now, the tone of our discussions are different. Now, industry key players want to be part of the solution. Today, I'm here to update you on some of the first steps that we're taking to stabilize grocery prices in Canada.
This is just the beginning. No one would suspect or expect that this is the end. This is actually the beginning of a number of actions that we want to take to help stabilize prices in Canada. We will continue to fight every day for Canadians. That's what I do. That's what we all do in order to improve the situation. So first, I have secured initial commitments from the top 5 grocers to take concrete actions to stabilize food prices in Canada. Starting soon, Canadians will be able to see rollout of actions such as discount across a basket of food products, price freezes, and price matching campaigns, to name a few. Because as you would appreciate, I receive plans from different grocers, and obviously we're just naming a few examples of what I've been saying. But these measures will bring a much-needed, more competitive marketplace, and the winners of that are obviously Canadians. Because what we want is to set an objective, but the way to achieve it, we obviously want competition to play. And I can tell you, I've been looking at some flyers this morning, and you already see action in terms of different grocers adjusting ahead, obviously, of Thanksgiving. Each grocer has different actions, so it will be up to Canadians to judge them, to benefit from the best offer across the nation. Grocers need to compete to meet the expectation of Canadians across the country. And that's really what you're going to see. I think what we've been able is to provide a catalyst to have a more competitive environment, which will bring benefits to Canadians. Deuxième mesure, nous allons renforcer le bureau.
Second action, we will strengthen the Consumer Bureau to protect the needs of consumers in the grocery and food sector. The government will engage in oversight on the commitments made by key players in the food industry, especially international manufacturers. We
recall that I did not only meet the large grocers, but we meet the international manufacturers. So what I've tasked the Consumers Bureau is to make sure that we would monitor their practices and their prices to make sure that we have more transparency and we can take further action. Le bureau sera aussi
The office will also have the mandate to investigate practices that are harmful to consumers, such as shrinkflation.
And dequaliflation are also things that we want the Bureau, the Office of Consumer Affairs, to focus on, because that's going to be a way for us to inform Canadians about what we're seeing in the market. Thirdly, we will continue to call on all players of the industry to establish the Grocery Code of Conduct that will improve fairness and transparency. And I can tell you, when I was speaking to the Federation of Independent Grocers, who represents 6,900 small players in the industry, that's something that they were very keen on, that we continue to push. This is work in progress. It's been going on for a number of months with our partners in the province, but certainly the Code of Conduct is one important aspect in this series of measures we're taking to improve the situation here in Canada. Quatrièmement, nous allons commencer à recueillir des données supplémentaires sur l'ensemble des prix de la chaîne d'approvisionnement des aliments.
Throughout the grocery food chain. We will have a data hub for food prices. This is similar to what they have in the United States called the Food Dollar Survey. This will help us keep an eye on grocery and food prices in Canada. We will increase transparency about food prices, which will help small players.
I've said, ministers, there's an imbalance when you negotiate as a small and medium-sized producer if you want to sell to the big grocery chain in Canada. One of the way that other countries, I've looked at France in particular, the United States, one way to do that is to have more disaggregated data so that in order to, for the smaller players to be able to see how prices are evolving to the supply chain, because we know it's a very complex supply chain, thousands and thousands of actors. So this is going to be a step forward as well to help the smaller producers to somehow have a bit more of equity in the negotiation when they're negotiating prices with the large grocery chain. Et enfin, nous allons moderniser le cadre législatif.
Our last action will be to modernize the legislative framework of the Competition Act. We've started with what you've seen in Bill C-56, introduced by Minister Freeland. C-56 is a very important bill. When there's more competition, Canadians have more options and better prices. And as the Deputy Prime Minister said, it's high time for us to take action. The opposition, if they want to help Canadians and help stabilize prices, they should support C-56.
These initial 5 measures, when you're looking at them together, will help to stabilize food prices in Canada. But we are obviously open to doing more. This is not by any way mission accomplished. This, I would say, is work in progress. We're going to be at that every single day for the next few months. We have been clear, if these measures do not bring relief to Canadians, we're going to monitor closely and we are prepared to take further action. Bottom line, we're going to hold their feet to the fire. And one thing that Canadians can trust us with is that we have their back. We had their back during COVID, we have their back today, and we'll keep fighting for them at every single step of the way. With that, I'll pass to my dear colleague, the President of Treasury Board. Anita?
Merci beaucoup, tout le monde.
Thank you very much, everyone.
I'd like to welcome Leah Taylor-Roy and Ryan Turnbull here, our colleagues. So nice to see you here. Listen, what we are trying to ensure we do as a government and certainly at Treasury Board is to ensure effective management of resources and taxpayer dollars. So what we've been doing is creating additional tools to help managers in their decision-making regarding outsourcing. And today, I am announcing the release of the Manager's Guide, Key Considerations When Procuring Professional Services. And this guide sets out key questions to help managers determine when to contract for professional services versus when to use internal resources. Ce guide établit des questions clés.
These guidelines will help managers decide when to contract out for professional services.
The initial step to help decide whether to outsource is for managers to consider specific reasons why external providers are better positioned to deliver the services and to identify key constraints such as timelines and budgetary considerations. If a manager decides to contract for professional services, they then have additional guidelines to help them structure and manage the procurement in a manner that delivers the best value. Ensuite, si un gestionnaire décide de passer en contrat.
If a manager decides to outsource for professional services, there will be guidelines to guide them to manage that, to manage this outsourcing and the best way.
They have to identify measures to mitigate risks, such as establishing off-ramps in the contract, unbundling requirements into smaller value and or shorter contracts, to allow for diversification in the procurement chain. Il y a aussi des questions afin d'assurer.
There are also ways to ensure that managers take responsibility for following these processes, the policies, laws, regulations, and collective agreements.
Not exhaustive. Managers will need to refer to the directive on the management on procurement as well as other policies and procedures, so that if they choose to outsource, they do so in a manner that is prudent, that is responsible, and that delivers the best value for taxpayers' dollars. All departments are expected to use these guidelines alongside other relevant resources, and I have written to my colleagues across government today to ensure that these guidelines are distributed widely, respected, and adhered to. I will say that as a former professor, I realize the value that education plays in the system, especially when introducing guidelines such as this. And so TBS, Treasury Board, is working with the Canada School of Public Service to have the principles outlined in the guide included in procurement-related training and development to broaden the reach and to broaden the knowledge about these guidelines across the system. And then finally, to achieve what it is set out to do, this guide is going to be adjusted and reviewed periodically to ensure that it continues to be an effective tool for managers. In other words, there is a sunset provision in the guidelines that will ensure that it is an evergreen document, continually updated and applicable to the circumstances at hand. Thank you very much. Merci.
Thank you, ministers. We have about 20 minutes for questions and a lot of people on the list, so I'll do my best. Laurence Martin, Radio-Canada.
Laurence Martin, Radio-Canada. Hello, Minister Champagne. You said that soon we will see results with groceries. Can you tell us what you mean by soon? Will we see lower costs in 2 weeks or 2 weeks? Answer, well, I'd say that even in the upcoming days or weeks, things will improve. I mentioned that I saw some flyers this morning with prices. I'm following this very closely. Some measures have been suggested by grocers, and we are taking measures as well. So the goal is to stabilize prices. We're working on how. Yes, but when? Answer, well, even take a look at flyers. There were flyers out this morning, flyers and coupons, offers. Our goal is to set objectives, but we need competition. Competition will ensure that Canadians get more value for their money. I've already seen it this morning in some flyers. There are flyers with prices for Thanksgiving, which is around the corner. So grocers, major grocers are already starting to come out with their prices for Thanksgiving. We now are comparable to what's happened in France and in England with Woodrow. So the tone has really changed. There's been a real shift now with the major grocers. So I think we're going to increase competition and Canadians will win at the end of the day. Question, are you satisfied with what the grocers are offering? And will you be taxing excess profits or answer? Well, I'm not fully satisfied. We weren't fully satisfied with the first offer we got. I can confirm that, and so can the finance minister. We really had to fight for a better offer. So as I've said, this is a first step. These are really initial measures. We're creating an office that will keep an eye on the evolution of these initiatives. And everything's on the table for now. We're willing to take any necessary action. We're going to continue taking action because we want to stabilize prices. Now, these initial measures are a step in the right direction, but we will be following this very closely month to month. Everything's on the table. We're at the beginning of a huge undertaking to stabilize prices. I'd like to add that I joined Francois-Philippe at the first meeting with CEOs of major grocery chains. We're a team. We're working together. All of the government's tools and resources are available, and that includes the resources that the Minister of Finance has. So that's the truth, and that's the situation.
National Post.
Yeah, Minister Champagne, when you announced this initiative, the government was talking about tax measures. You say now that the grocers are offering discounts, price freezes, price matching. Those are all things they were doing before this. So what gives you any confidence that we're going to see real change in grocery prices?
Well, I would say two things. First, you see certainly new measures. What I was thinking is that I have 5 plans, so I'm taking examples to be clear, because obviously, you want to maintain the competitive pressures. So I'm not saying one is doing that, the other one is going to do that in the third month or in the fourth month. We want competition because obviously what you're seeing this morning already in the different flyers, you see people are positioning themselves ahead of Thanksgiving. So what I would say to you is that this is an ongoing process. What you will see is an acceleration of a number of things that they are offering. I think you would see a larger scope of things that they were offering, and certainly over a longer period. That's what I've seen. And I compared their plans to what I've seen with Waitrose, with what they did in Carrefour in France. And to be honest, I think it compares well to what you've seen in other jurisdictions with respect to the measures they have been taking to stabilize prices. So the measures you see today are initial actions they're taking. And I think what we've been able to do, if you ask me, the essence of what we've created is certainly a more competitive marketplace. And that's the best way to stabilize prices, because now I can tell you, I've spoken to all the CEOs, they're all watching each other. Who's moving on this, who's moving on that, and we're checking that. And that's why the bureau we're going to be creating is going to be helping to monitor that, because we need people to monitor, not just going on apps to check prices. But I think what we've been doing is pushing towards a more competitive environment. And the best way, look at any jurisdiction, the best way to stabilize prices is more competition. And I think that's what we have created, and we're going to be monitoring. And like we said, nothing is off the table. These are early days, but the direction that I'm seeing is encouraging. And this is not about us. This is about Canadians. They're talking to their 40 million customers who are watching today. 40 million people are probably watching, and they're going to adjust their buying patterns in light of what they see. And that's what we want, because it's going to, if the 40 million of us are putting our collective purchasing power together, things will change. That's what we want to see.
Are those tax measures, though, that you discussed, did you give them clarity on what those are? And I guess when can Canadians actually expect to see real discounts, a real cheaper price here? And are those tax measures still on the table?
So, like I said, we've already seen things this morning. I look at the flyers early, I think it was 6 o'clock, looking at the different flyers. So we see things happening. There's things that are going to be done in the short term, midterm, and long term in the plans that we've seen. But I would say over the next few days and over the next few weeks and over the next few months. So, because that's the competitive pressure that it's there. So people are going to, grocers are going to react to what each other are doing. And what I've seen in the plan, there's some creative thinking there, looking at international best practices. And as you know, when you have 5 of them, they're all going to adjust themselves in light of what they see. And like Minister Freeland and I said, nothing is off the table. This is almost day one, So we want to see results. We want to see outcome. We want to see price stabilization. And we're going to monitor that. That's why we'll have a team of professionals to monitor that in the Bureau. And I would say everything is still on the table. And maybe Minister Freeland wants to add to the possible other measures that we're considering. But this is day one of a fight that we're fighting on behalf of Canadians.
Thank you, Francois-Philippe.
From putting food on the table to having a home for that table, we've been listening to the federal government talking about ways to make life more affordable for Canadians. So for housing, the Housing Accelerator Fund, tax-free first home savings account, and then when it comes to groceries, price freezes, price matches, investigating shrinkflation, and also a data hub for food prices.